Hi, Doctor. Hi, everyone. We can start the webinar now. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you today in our third module of the Use of Technology in Hybrid Education Professional Development Certificate. Today's module, Assessment in Distance Learning, will be presented by Dr. Shafia Abdurrahman. Before we start, I've been muted. So before we start the module, let me remind you of the guidelines. To access the recorded sessions and get your certificate of completion or certificate of attendance, you need to register in the ADU community portal. Participants who submit the final reflection will receive a certificate of completion. Participants who do not submit the final reflection will receive a certificate of attendance. For those choosing to submit the reflection, the deadline will be on November 4, 2021 by 11:59 p.m. Abu Dhabi UAE timing. For translation services during the sessions, kindly download the Microsoft Translate, the code to which will be provided by the IT department. During the sessions, you can write your comments in the chat box. You can use the Q&A option in both Mentimeter or Zoom to ask any questions related to the topic, and the presenter will answer your questions accordingly. You can also use raise hand button in Zoom in case you want to speak. Dr. Shafia is an associate professor and chair of Department of Education at Abu Dhabi University. She's been in the field of education as a secondary school teacher and educator for more than 28 years, teaching mathematics and preparing teachers to teach both primary and secondary mathematics to pre-service and in-service teachers. Dr. Shafia also teaches and supervises graduate students in education. Her research interests include mathematical thinking and learning, use of technology in mathematics teaching and learning, curriculum design, and teacher education. Dr. Shafia, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Layal. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this PD certificate session. Do we start, Layal, or?
Yes, Doctor, I think we have around 371 attendees now. If you want to give it a couple minutes so we have more attendees, because I know a lot more have registered.
Okay, so we'll just give them a couple more minutes.
For those asking in the chat how to get the certificate of completion and not only certificate of attendance, please, you need to submit the final reflection by November 4, 11:59 p.m. Abu Dhabi timing. Please note that IT department is adding instructions and guidelines in the chat. So you can refer to these guidelines for translation and for registering. Dr. Shafia, we have more than 430 attendees by now, if you wish to start.
Okay, thank you very much, Laya. And thank you very much, all of you, for joining our Future EDU 2030 Future of Education series, the use of technology in hybrid education, PD certification. So today's module is the third in the series, titled Assessment in Distance Learning. So we will start now. So the session outline, we will be speaking about what is assessment, why do we assess, the different types of assessment, and how is assessment looks like in distance learning, and the use of formative and summative assessment techniques to mark the students' progress and to support their learning. I'd like to start with this Palestinian proverb that you cannot fatten a cow by weighing it. So this has a very deep meaning, especially when it comes to assessment. So if weighing a cow more often will make it fatter, then by the same token, testing children more and more will make them smarter. So definitely this is not the case. So I would like you to scan this QR code for the assessment of your understanding of what assessment is about. So I'll give you about 10 seconds to log in using the QR code or the AHA slide code. Okay. So why do we assess? That is the first question. So we see some answers coming to evaluate students, to evaluate, evaluation, identifying progress, identifying learning outcomes, to bridge gap, checking level of understanding. Okay. So most of the responses looks like for evaluation purposes. Okay, thank you. Next question. In your opinion, are students being assessed fairly? Okay, so this is very interesting because there's a small number of you agreeing that yes, they are completely fairly assessed, and there's a small number saying not at all fairly assessed. and a majority is saying somewhat fairly assessed. Okay. Next, what are some of the issues of with our current assessment practices? Authenticity, cheating, reliability, not authentic, unfair practices, differentiation, not addressing differentiation, whether it is valid or not, rote learning, integrity, students are not assessed on their level, standardized but not differentiated. Okay, right. So we'll look at what assessment is all about first. So the word assess comes from the Latin verb assidere, meaning to sit with. So in assessment, essentially what one is supposed to do is to sit with the learner. So in this definition, it implies that this is something that we do with the students and for the students and not to the students. So as you can see from your responses, this is what you feel that we are doing. We are actually doing something to the student, but not we are doing something with or for the students. So basically, assessment is a human activity involving interactions aimed at seeking to understand what learners have achieved. It is a very critical aspect of the teaching and learning process. An accurate assessment of knowledge is necessary for educators to either provide feedback about their students' ability or to tailor their instruction to meet the needs of the students. It can be done in formal or informal ways, and it may be descriptive. It has to be descriptive rather than judgmental. So what we need is a reconceptualization of assessment as the engine that drives and shapes the learning rather than simply using end of term assessment to grade and to report on performance. Roundtree in 1977 gave this definition of assessment. Assessment in education can be thought of as occurring whenever a person in some kind of an interaction, direct or indirect, with another person is conscious in obtaining and interpreting information about the knowledge and understanding or abilities and attitudes of that other person. To some extent or another, it is an attempt to know that person. So if teachers use this definition, we are using assessment as a means to get to know our students. Interestingly, in the definition, there is no mention of marking or grading. Very little is about the system of judgment. So we're not judging, no mention of measurement or reporting procedure. Rather, it is expressed in a more vague term as attempting to know and to make inferences. So what is the state of our assessment now? As many of you agreed, there is a wealth of research about assessment. A lot of research has been done about assessment. but there is a poverty of practice. So that means the more we know about assessment, the less we are putting it into practice. So this calls a shift from focusing on teaching to focusing on student learning. So the major purpose, as many of you have mentioned, there are two major purposes of assessing students. One is to provide support and feedback to learners to improve their learning. And the other one is to report on what they have achieved. Also, as a result, it will give us some indication whether or not we are going in the right direction in our teaching. So the primary purpose is to increase student learning and development rather than simply to grade or to rank their performance. One of the key issues that we have to keep in mind is how to align assessment with the learning objectives. So when we have a clear aim and objective of our the subject that we are going to teach, then our assessment will be aligned. So first of all, there needs to be a clear objective in terms of what students should be able to do on completion of the unit. So these objectives, as you know, and many of you are familiar with, uses the SMART acronym, which is the objectives should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timed objectives. In writing the objectives, usually we use action verbs because these will qualify for the SMART objectives, which means to critique, to demonstrate, to describe, to solve, but not to, in a vague term as to understand, to think. We cannot measure that. So the aim, a good aim and objective, plus the content, plus the teaching and learning activities will then culminate into a good assessment. A good indication of whether we are doing the assessment in the right way would be to use the Bloom's taxonomy as a guide. So as many of you know, Bloom's taxonomy, there are 6 levels to the Bloom's taxonomy. The lowest one would be remembering or recalling facts and basic concepts. Second one is understanding, explaining ideas and concepts. Third one is applying, to be able to use the information in new situation. Next is analysis, to be able to draw connections between ideas. Then after that, we have evaluation, which is to justify a stand or decision. And finally, create, to be able to produce new or original work. So in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, the lower 3 levels, which are remembering, understanding, and applying, these can be considered as lower order activities that uses lower order thinking skills. The top 3 levels are activities that include higher order thinking skills. So you can, whenever preparing for assessment, this is a good guide for you to know what actually you want the students to be able to do, and write the assessments accordingly. Another way of looking at Bloom's taxonomy is to combine it with combining the cognitive or the thinking process with the knowledge dimension. So meaning when you are asking question at the remembering level, these are very knowledge which is factual. Understanding, it goes conceptual. and then applying, procedural, and so on. So when it comes to assessment, there are three basic elements that we need to remember. The first one is connection. So questions here would be, how will you as an instructor feasibly communicate with your students? Next is, how will they communicate with you? And how will students communicate with each other and work together? So this is the connection element. Next is the content element. How do you get students, how do you get content across to the students in the most accessible and easiest way? And how will students engage with that content? How do you want them to work on that content? And the third element is context. How can you, as an instructor, provide context for your instruction, especially in an online environment? So next we come to the types of assessment. Basically, there are two types of assessment. One is formative and the other one is summative. Formative assessment usually occurs throughout a lesson or a course and seeks to improve student achievement or learning objectives through approaches that can support specific student needs. So formative assessments will include anything from asking a question at random, getting a nod from the students, or students looking confused from your questions, anything that gives you an indication of their understanding and progress, and to some extent whether or not as a teacher you are achieving the aim that you set out for. Summative assessment, on the other hand, evaluates student learning, knowledge, proficiency, or success of an instructional period at the end of the program, at the end of a course, or at the end of a unit. So these formative and summative assessment, they are actually interconnected. So you cannot say, okay, I'm going to now do a formative assessment and now I'm going to shift to summative assessment. They are interconnected. They seldom stand alone. And majority of genuine formative assessment is informal. So we can think of formative assessment as being informal, with the interactive and timely feedback and response from the teacher. It is also widely and by research have been argued that formative assessment has the greatest impact on learning and achievement. So what is actually formative assessment? Formative assessment is a systematic process of gathering evidence of learning. So any way that you want to use that gives you an indication that there is some progress in the learning. It is students communicating their understanding. So they are trying to reach out to you. So we saw just now that there is a connection issue that you need to make with your students. So students communicating their understanding. It happens during learning to allow for any adjustment in the teaching and learning time, to allow students to catch up with the material. It is used to diagnose misconception, and it is especially important right now during this pandemic, when students may feel less connected with their peers, with their instructor, and during this online learning. It creates more stability in a time when students are experiencing a high level of uncertainty. So they don't know what's going on around them. So teachers can actually create a low stake back and forth feedback kind of a loop that is important for students to measure their own progress. So research has shown that formative assessment improves student achievement, attitude, and also motivation. It allows students to show their levels of understanding. It helps academically challenged or struggling students to perform better. And it provides instructors with information they need to determine whether concepts need to be retaught or who is ready to the next level. So formative assessment can be thought of as assessment for learning. So that means you are, as an instructor, you are providing feedback and helping them to progress in their learning. So it can be taken at varying intervals throughout the course. So in the class, during your teaching, what you are doing mostly is gathering information and giving feedback that will improve students' quality of learning, and also at the same time, the quality of the subject or the course itself. So this information will be used by the teacher to either let the students know that they need to practice more, or they need to be retaught, or they can advance to the next level. Some of the key elements of formative assessments, it begins with the identifying the learning goals and outcomes. It involves rich conversation between teachers and students. It involves effective, timely feedback, active involvement of the students, and also teachers responding to the learning needs of different students. So next we're going to talk about feedback. How good is, or how good of a quality is the feedback that we are giving to students? So feedback should address any misconception or strength. So when you're giving feedback during the formative assessment, it will be used to address any misconceptions, or even to affirm any strength that students are showing. It guides students' success. So from the feedback from the teacher, it will the students can know whether or not they are reaching their goal, their learning goal. The feedback should clearly communicate the learning goals and the expectations of the teacher. It should be timely. So you don't wait until the class finish or to address students' concerns. It should be given quite quick enough to act upon to improve. And students also, they have their responsibility to act on the feedback. So it is not just, teacher doing their job. The students also must act on the feedback. So if we look at this example, let's say an instructor gives students a quiz throughout the unit of study. So the instructor wants students to become more motivated with frequent feedback. Instructor wants students to see the types of questions they can expect on their summative assessment. This is not formative assessment. Okay, because the students do not have the opportunity to improve on their past work, which is from the quiz information. They don't have the opportunity to work on it. So instructor does not use the information to adjust the instruction. So this clearly is not a formative assessment. Another example, instructor reads a prepared statement and asks students to indicate with their hands, either show a thumbs up if you understand, show thumbs down if you don't understand, or thumb sideways, And also some teachers use the traffic light symbol to show the teacher whether they agree with the statement. The instructor will see every student's degree of understanding. Instructor can immediately decide whether or not to go on to the next concept or to revisit the current concept to address any misconception. So this is formative assessment. Some of the different strategies for formative assessment, it can be immediate, meaning in the moment. So a body language, facial expression from the teacher, you know, she can nod or show some disagreement, or are you sure, that kind of a thing. Clickers is also good for those who are with attention deficit. Finger voting, entry or exit card, minute paper, which we will look at in a minute. Orally justifying their reasoning, think, pair, share, and also any other form of embedded instructor questions. So that is feedback that teacher gives in the moment. You can also give formative assessment on a different frequency, which is either daily or weekly. This is when you have one-to-one conversation with students. On group work, you can give them feedback on the best responses. Discussion board, when you are giving you know, feedback on analyzing their errors. Graphic organizers is also good. Quizzes, role playing, journaling, and also peer and self-assessment. So we can ask students to assess themselves or use their friends to assess their work. It can also be done periodically, several times during the course. So we can break the projects into small parts to give them feedback, comment only on the grading, but not to be used as a terminal grade. When they are preparing for debates, the teacher gives them feedback that can also be used as a formative assessment. Any periodic surveys the teacher does in order to find out what students are, where students' level of understanding is, or any conversations about the up-to-date grade that they have. So you have been getting a B, so how can you, what are the things you need to do to move on to the next grade? So these are the different strategies for formative assessment. Summative assessment, on the other hand, is an assessment of learning. This is generally taken by students at the end of a unit to demonstrate the sum of what they have or have not learned. The goal here is, you know, to give like a confirmation of their standing, and it would usually be used to rank the students, to show them where they are in relation to some other students. So this is the most traditional way of evaluating student work, and usually it will have to be a reliable, valid, and free of bias assessment. So you can see the difference between formative and summative assessment. If we can just glance through, summative is more formal, formative is more informal. Formative is encouraging students towards mastery. Formative will alleviate students' anxieties, especially during online learning. It is used to adjust instruction and address any misconceptions, and it is done during instruction. Whereas summative assessment is usually taken as the student's best effort. So let's say on the day of the summative assessment, the child was sick, or something happened. Clearly that is not the indication of the student's competency, but unfortunately that would be taken as their best effort. It is used to grade students. It is used to evaluate for accountability and provide a grade, and also usually it's done after instruction. So if we can think of, do an analogy about summative and formative assessment. Summative assessment, if we use this on, think of students as plants. Summative assessment of the plant is the process of simply measuring the plant. It might be interesting to compare and analyze measurements, but in themselves, they do not affect the growth of the plant. So you're only interested in how tall the plant has grown. And you can make a comparison with another plant. Oh, this has grown that much, this has grown this much. So that is the use of summative assessment. Formative assessment, on the other hand, is the equivalent of feeding, watering, maybe talking to the plant, which is done according to their needs. So some plant maybe like you need to water more, some you need to water less, some you need to put more fertilizer, some maybe you need to talk to the plant. So these will directly affect their growth. Another analogy is when the chef tastes the soup, it is formative assessment. And when the guest tastes the soup, it is summative assessment. So the chef will not hand over the soup to the guest until and unless he is happy that the soup tastes great. So that is the analogy of formative and summative assessment. What are some of the factors inhibiting assessment? First, what we are doing is we are focusing on quantity and presentation, how the presentation of the work look, rather than quality of the learning. Attention is given more on marking and grading rather than providing advice for improvement. Comparing students with each other, and this is of course should not be the aim, but nevertheless it is done through the assessment work. Now we come to how to do this assessment from a distance. Now this is a very, very challenging situation that we are in right now. How do we do assessment from a distance? So I'd like to just quickly play this video about how assessment used to be like. Okay, so assessing students amidst the pandemic. So, you know, nowadays, since students are not coming in to class face to face, and teaching and learning are done from a distance, so we don't have cases of cheating going on with the student next to us, like what we saw just now. However, there are different concerns when it comes to assessing students during this pandemic. So now we are forced to turn the traditional paper-based methods of assessing students to using online tools and methodologies. So the challenge is most of academics were not properly trained to effectively use online tools for assessment and minimize the chances of any academic misconduct. What they did was they just transformed the existing assessment. Whatever was there on the paper was transformed into online assessment. Therefore, these poorly designed tests results in calls for questions about academic integrity. Because of, students can easily have access to their mobile phones or the adults around the house to give them answers to the assessment questions. So COVID-19 actually did us something good in re-educating us, the academics, to face the challenges and maintaining integrity by producing valid but a variety of assessment strategies. So as many of you would agree, the major concerns with assessment at a distance, the first one would be academic integrity. How do we know that the students' performance in the assessment is actually their own work? Next is the reluctance to move away from traditional examination type assessment. So because teachers were so used to traditional paper and pencil kind of an assessment, many are still reluctant to move away from this practice. Third one is the difficulty for educators to try out different forms of assessment. So to move away from paper-based, and when they go on to online assessment, to try out different forms of assessments. So COVID-19 has created this emergency where everything has to be moved online, even with all these concerns around academic integrity. There was a sudden change in the grading system. Schools were, in order to protect students' grading, schools were forced to cancel some of their assessments. And this happened quite a lot. Even, international exams were canceled because, they wanted to protect students' grading. Next is no detriment policy. So that means because we cannot guarantee that that piece of work is genuinely from the student, they use this no detriment policy, where to be on the safe side, we will not grant you any grade for this work. There is also inconsistencies where students doubt about the fairness, equity, and standard of the grade. So teachers sometimes simply finalize the results based on the available grading. So they just, whatever the students have produced at the up until that moment, they just use that as a base for grading. Some used individualized approaches by comparing grades from different levels, so different elements. So they take some element from students' feedback, some from attendance, and use that as a approach for grading the students. Others even rounded the grades to the nearest classification. So because there is a minor discrepancy in the grade, so they just use the to give the students the benefit of the doubt, they use the nearest classification. And also special pass or no pass. So this one was very widely used, where rather than giving students A, B, C, or D, or an F, students can opt for either a special pass or a no pass. The problem with this is that, you know, when employers look at this transcript, they will not be able to know the actual achievement of the child. So, you know, if it is 67, if it is a B, is it in the lower B or a higher B? We don't know. So students are also complaining with the grading, saying that they are unfairly graded, or some people have more advantage than the others. So COVID the assessment is the first casualty of the pandemic. This was what you know, many are concerned about when students started online learning. So the first impact of assessment integrity was imposed by the pandemic. Students were concerned, some of the student concerns were they feel isolated, they are new to technology, there is a sudden increase in workload because of the, you know, if there is a lab session that they need to attend, because of social distancing, the class size has to be reduced. So an increase for the in the workload of the students. Digital divide, managing students and staff with a variety of digital capabilities was a big challenge. No time to understand their own needs and barriers to learning. So because they were unprepared, or their inability to change the time management according to the new situation. So what does a framework, so now that we are in this situation, how does assessment in a distance learning look like? So if we think about the framework for assessment of distance learning, we need to develop a common and global understanding of the competencies that we want on the part of the students. What do we want them to be able to achieve? Not as a learning outcome, but as a whole. A varied teaching and learning situation. So face-to-face, blended, and also online forms of learning that can offer synchronous and asynchronous communication modes. We need different assessment intentions depending on whether we are doing diagnostic, formative, or summative assessment, and what kind of a role do all the key players in the system will play. Teachers and students, what are their roles at different times of the assessment process? a coherent alignment of the object, what we want them to achieve, the skills and the knowledge, the assessment methods, the task and instrument, and also the ICT tools in order to assess learners in a competency-based approach. So all these three, the skills and knowledge, the assessment method, and also the ICT tools should be aligned. And also a focus on interaction between the key players. How do students interact with the content? How do teachers interact with students? And how do students interact with students? So having established this framework for assessment of distance learning, the first is to, from this framework, the approach would be to first challenge to, it would be presenting a challenge to devise effective learning encounters using computer-mediated communication. How do we devise, our assessment tasks using computer-mediated communication? Also, it overlooks the importance of assessment as rather a more powerful influence on student learning. So we are so busy with preparing the material, but forgetting that assessment is can be a very powerful influence on student learning. Research into distance learning suggests that actually there is a very, very complex behavior on the part of the learners that is at work. So we provide the material hoping that they will gain something from it. But actually there's a more complex thing going on. Questions that arise would be, what kind of a new learning and assessment opportunities can be created through online learning? What kind of pedagogies can be employed to support meaningful online assessment? What are the losses and gains of this medium for teachers and learners in distance education? Do traditional modes of assessment readily translate into online environment, or do we need new ways of explaining the purposes and forms of assessment? So these are questions that arise when we think about using online technologies in distance learning. So how to do formative assessment in distance learning? First, we need to ask the question, what does formative assessment look like during distance learning? Without being there, without this proximity with the students, how can teachers gather and act on in the moment information, the kind of behavior, emotion, and situations that can affect learning and inform instruction? So these are the two questions that we need to address when it comes to formative assessment in distance learning. So in distance learning, formative assessment can take the form of non-accessible activities and feedback in study material. So the different activities which are not assessed from the study material. Self-assessment, it can take a form of self-assessment, quizzes, and tests. So students can self-assess themselves. Feedback from the teacher on the assignment, and also from their friends, their peers. The dialogue with teacher, tutors, and other students, and also any non-accessible tests. So these are the different forms of formative assessment that can take place in distance learning. Actually, so if we look at the window of opportunity that formative assessment, the distance learning can afford for assessment. Now, students in face-to-face setting, they have a range of opportunities to demonstrate their learning in class, in person, which are not confined to formal assessment tasks. So they can show their interest, their motivation, their questioning, their interaction, all are done, all are on display throughout the learning encounter. So that means they have this benefit over distance learners. Whereas in the distance learners, they rarely have these opportunities to communicate their learning. They are much more dependent on formal assessment tasks. There is a much smaller window of opportunity to show their abilities and the values that they hold, less opportunity to diagnose their own errors or mistakes. And so therefore, distance learners are much more dependent on effective early communication of assessment requirements, well-designed and cohesive assessment tasks, and useful and timely support, and also a transparent marking scheme. So, you know, as many of you have experienced, it is especially with young children, it's very, very hard to get them to even no. With young children in distance learning, you cannot stop them talking. So they want to just, you know, unmute and say this and that. Whereas with older children, it is very hard to get them to speak in this behind the screen. So the window of opportunity for these two groups of learners are totally different. So that is why distance learners will depend on all these different types of requirement in order to function properly. So assessment activities must be thoroughly planned, communicated, and also must be managed well. So in this, there is two models that are at play for dealing with assessment for distance learners. One is the deficit model and one is the opportunity model. So the deficit model of distance learning sees learners as lacking contact with teachers and peers. They experience difficulties gaining access to educational resources. They lack the opportunity of their face-to-face friends. So this is what deficit model looks at distance learning. However, the opportunity model sees them bringing a wealth of experience, abilities, and resources to the learning encounters. The thing is, when we design our tasks, we often are more concerned with what students couldn't do rather than what they could do. So this opportunity model is more focused on providing or looking at the variety of ways in which learners can demonstrate their achievement, can demonstrate their understanding, given their unique setting, behind the screen, rather than attempting to homogenize the experience for both groups. So what are some of the opportunities presented by online learning and assessment? These include peer and self-assessment, teamwork, collaborative assessment tasks, online dialogue and debate, simulation, role-playing, problem-solving, online testing, and also preparing digital scrapebook and portfolios. So before preparing assessment that is appropriate for distance learners, the methods or what educators need to keep in mind is it should be focusing on students' ability to think critically and making judgments. So this can take the form of maybe essays, reports, or them writing journals. Next is solving problems. So solving problems, they can also solving and developing plans. So here it can take the form of electronic discussion, bulletin boards where they can engage in with live with the other students, enhanced by group work and discussion, and also brainstorming and other techniques. Assessment methods include problem scenarios or simulated events. The third one is performing procedures and demonstrating techniques. So let's say you have you want to assess students' ability to perform some experiment in the lab. So these can be done through videos where students take a video of their to show their ability to engage in these procedures. So these will include how to handle equipment, how to use a correct procedure and protocol, how to put theory into practice, and also how to communicate what they have done. Next is managing and developing themselves. So because they are at a distance, this is one of the skills that is very important on how to manage and develop themselves. So self-management skills and abilities would be aimed at helping the students take responsibility for their own learning and development. So this need to be taught to them. So they can be encouraged to write in a journal, prepare an autobiography, or prepare a simple portfolio. Next is assessing and managing information. So how do they access and manage the information that they need? So these abilities are developed in learners to encourage and foster important information, how to employ research skills, and so on, because they will be using this information at a later stage of their life. So here the focus is on process and methods of accessing and managing information rather than the end product. So they need to know, okay, I need to know this piece of information. How do I go and access this? How do I manage this information? Rather than putting it in a nice product. The fifth one would be to demonstrate knowledge and understanding. So this can be assessed in companion with other activities in order to demonstrate critical thinking and problem-solving abilities. So the skills that will be developed here would be identifying, describing, relating, or recalling, and also reporting on what they have understood. This can take in the form of a written assessments. The sixth one is designing, creating, and performing. So here we can give them projects and also ask them to prepare portfolios and also videos to show their designing, creating, and performing skills. And the last one is communicating. This for distance learners will include any oral, written, or visual communication. This can take in the form of a in the form of a written and visual communication. They can write something in for the report, for the journal, and also in essays. For the oral communication, they can this can be assessed as a distance through their use of videos demonstrating any of their work that they have done. Can also take the form of debates where at a distance they use their communication to debate on a certain issue. Visual communication, they can use any software such as PowerPoint to present their work. So these different methods are some which are appropriate for the distance students at the distance learning. So that's why we can think of COVID situation as something that is how do we turn this around to take the benefit out of it. Some of the formative assessment best practices would be to keep a clear criteria for what is a good assessment, a good performance, how to encourage students to be self-reflective and original thinkers, to allow students to take ownership of their own learning, to give students a detailed feedback, to encourage teachers and peers on a dialogue around learning, promote positive motivational beliefs and self-esteem, provide opportunity to close the gap between where they are now and also what is the desired performance, and also to collect information which can be used to help shape the teaching on the part of the teacher. So formative assessment in distance learning can take place. These are some of the best practices for doing formative assessment. Some of the techniques include asking students to write a 1-minute paper and then to submit it through email or any learning management system and post it in a discussion forum. Madia's point is it can be submitted via email or through a weekly quiz or survey. 1-sentence summary, this also can be emailed or on posted in a weekly forum. So 1-minute paper, how does it look like? This here, the goal is to get the students to get a feel of whether your students have captured the most important points of the lesson. And for students to identify which areas they need further support on. So they will write a 1-minute paper. Example would be, what are 2 of the most significant, meaningful, surprising, or disturbing things that you have learned during this session. So as the name suggests, it takes only 1 minute for them to write something on. So an example would be, so the students can be asked to write something about the lesson. Is there anything you did not understand? What questions is bothering you about the lesson? Madia's point here, this can allow students to write one learning concept that was unclear to them after a particular lesson or group of lessons. So what is it that they are concerned with? The goal here is to help students, to help the teachers assess the students, which one of them are having difficulties, so that the teacher can provide any additional assistance. The one sentence summary allows students to demonstrate their understanding of an idea or concept by writing only one sentence to capture the most important elements. So students can write one sentence that answers questions of who, what, when, or how. So the main goal is to provide a summary, a very concise summary of what they have just learned. Formative and summative assessment strategies through collaborative learning with peer feedback. So this can be done in groups or pairs. Students can view, read, or analyze their peers' work and offer feedback. So here, because they have this forum where you can allow their friends to comment on their work. So the technique here would be the teacher would first choose a place where students can post these artifacts, their projects or anything, and it can be linked through Google Slides or Padlet, and then the instructor will provide the link to other students to give feedback. Some of the best practices for summative assessment would be to think of options based on knowing your students and their capacities. Also to consider design strategies that will discourage cheating, and also to consider small, shorter exams. So this has been done, the way summative assessment are now done through asking students to actually come physically to take the exams face to face. So if it were to be done on a distance, then it can take the forms of online exams, problem-based exams, portfolios, or gallery walk, which we'll be talking about in a minute. So again, with this, although the intention is to discourage cheating, but still students will find a way to cheat. So what do we do with that? So for summative assessment for exams online, you can randomize question order so that they don't pass the answers or the questions to other students. Randomizing the answer order, giving them a time limit, and then you can decide whether or not to allow them to backtrack or to allow them to take multiple attempts. So these features are there in most learning management systems. Also if you have exams to be delivered for the summative assessment, redesigning multiple choice questions into an open book problem-based exam that will require students to employ original thinking to solve a challenge or a problem. So these exams can either be done individually or in teams if you want to assess teamwork. And the problem-based assessment can then be made available in LMS or can be emailed. So again, the question would be, because they have access to a wealth of information, even if you try exam.net, where students cannot backtrack, they will find a way to cheat. So it would be good to give them open book exams, problem-based exams that will require them to show their original thinking and creativity. For portfolios, help students set a portfolio goal, generate an outline, and consider what story they want to tell. Students can add artifacts that are evidence of their work. Portfolios can be created in the learning management system on a shared document linked to a folder. So this will need, of course, other options for the shared folder. Gallery walk is a form where students can showcase their work through various forms of media or print. So here they can create a shared PowerPoint deck or Google slide. You can assign each student a slide, and then or one slide per class or group. So students can develop a clear direction and how to add these slides, and you can also give feedback on their slides, and they can get feedback from their peers as well. Students will upload their piece as a file or a video along with the description, and their peers will then be able to comment on the slide in the notes. Some of the issues with online learning and assessment is that it is not an uncommon scenario where discussion will be used as a learning activity. Students will be required to participate. Participation is noted by how many messages were posted by the student. But does this method measure learning? So, you know, just because I want to show that I was there, I will just write something in the post and that's it. Or sometimes teacher will see which student participates more. So is this a measure of learning? That is a question we need to ask ourselves. Some of the common complaints from online assessment from the instructor's perspective is that there's too much to assess. I don't know what activities to assess. I don't know if students are really ready for the test. How do I know students actually did the work or took the test? From the student's perspective, if they are supposed to discuss why doesn't that count part of their grade? If they're supposed to do something, why does quality matter? I just got a number, no feedback given. I didn't get any feedback for participation. So these are some of the complaints about online assessments. Feedback, of course, students participating in online activities look for feedback to know if the instructor actually read their work, whether their participation is valued, or whether their participation is adequate in terms of quality and also quantity. So feedback, it doesn't have to be individualized to be effective. A teacher can give a whole class commentary in terms of quality and also quantity. So some of the other issues with assessment is that sometimes online activities go unassessed. It is considered as an add-on syndrome. So you just add something onto the activities online just to show that you are in sync with what's happening now. Another one is students are more likely to participate when they know that there is an impact on their grade, and also sometimes teachers assessing the wrong thing. Some of the commonly used assessment methods include online quizzes, online interviews, game type activities, open-ended essay questions, dialogue simulations, peer evaluation, forum posts, and online poll surveys, and also drag and drop activities. Padlet is a very good tool that teachers can consider to increase interaction and collaboration. I'm sure most teachers have used this. It is an online free service that acts as a corkboard in the virtual space that allows live interaction between students and peers, and also between students and teachers. Good thing about Padlet is that you can not only use text, you can also put videos, images, flow charts can be added as well. So for students who want to say something more. It allows different formats to be used to set up an activity, allows students to choose a format of engagement that aligns with their learning styles. This technology saw a very good, a high reduction in stress and anxiety over assessment in the subject, because students can sometimes choose whether or not they want to put their name in what they are writing. So it encourages online dialogue, brainstorming, can be used as class diary to gather information about collaboration, cognitive, and also how they use the time effectively. Jamboard is another digital interactive whiteboard by Google. This one was announced in 2016. There is a 55-inch 4K touchscreen display that can be used for online collaboration using Google Workspace. WordWall, another literacy tool composed of an organized collection of words which are displayed in large visible letters on a wall, much like a bulletin board. Another one is Flipgrid. So one of the major issues with online learning is that the question of equal opportunity for all students to participate, engage, and interact. So Flipgrid is an online free-to-use video sharing tool that is very classroom friendly. It allows students to make short videos and can be used as a response system that allows students to explain and show their learning using video. And students can also choose to not show their face if they want to say something. So this will ensure their privacy. Kahoot, I'm sure most teachers have used this. This is a gamifying assessment where the class is brought to feel as though it is a real class. Gamification is when game elements are used in a non-game context that increases participation, excitement, engagement, and also a healthy competition. Word cloud, as we have used in many of these during this forum, is when you want to ask something about the subject that you are teaching. Word cloud is an amazing tool that will help provide insight into student understanding. their thoughts, and we can have we can use this as a great conversation starter. Word cloud can be used in the Mentimeter as well, to help students visualize the concept and engage with each other. Online debates, again, depending on your learning outcome, you can use online debate as a tool in Teams, Zoom, or WebEx for students to engage in debates and discussion. Some of the best practices for online assessment is to derive your assessment from your learning outcome, prioritize real-world issues and topics, encourage research and original thinking, embed any work-related, work-integrated learning experience in the course, administer short assessments of different types periodically, and also to be transparent in explaining to students how to complete their assignments. Other tools include iSpring Suite. Here, this one is a comprehensive e-learning authoring toolkit. It will allow students to create, students to use interactive quizzes, surveys, and dialogues, simulations for assessment. Socrative, I think most teachers are familiar with this. It is a quiz-making tool that enables teachers to create tests with multiple choice, true, false, or short answers. It has some very interesting features like exit tickets for students to gather feedback on the lesson. Spiral is a set of 5 apps for formative assessment. You can provide assessment in real time and hear from all students, turn slides into a discussion thread, let students create and share collaborative presentations, and also turn videos into a live chat with questions and quizzes. PeerGrade is also an online platform for hosting peer feedback sessions with students. So once you set up your assignment, learners can start working on and then submit their work in the form of text, files, videos, or even Google Docs. Students can review their work, each other's work, and also act on the feedback. There's also a place where teacher can write an overview of what they are seeing. Edpuzzle is a tool designed to specifically to work with videos. It allows both teachers and students to add voiceover, resources, comments, and quizzes to videos. Instructors can check if students are watching the video or how many times they have watched the video, and if they understand the content. Mentimeter, again, allows you to build interactive presentations with 13 interactive question types, including word clouds and quiz, multiple choice questions. So you can even export the results in a PDF or Excel sheet and then analyze the learner's results. Google Form is a very, very famous one. It is a very simple, widely used tool for building surveys and also graded quizzes. You can create multiple choice questions or also short answer questions. Nearpod, many teachers have been using this, is a web-based tool for making interactive classes with engaging activities like virtual reality, simulations, and also gamified quizzes. Quizalize, also very similar to Kahoot. You can get instant data on each student's progress and also automatically assign various resources to the students depending on the quiz score. And finally, fluency tutor. This is more relevant for language teachers. It's designed to track and assess students' oral reading progress. You can share the reading passages with your class and receive recordings of the assigned passages. So I would like to end with this. So especially in the online setting, if we, I think the COVID-19 situation has forced us to think of assessment in a different way, so that it caters for the needs and abilities for each student, and how the teacher can make the best out of this. So we are in uncharted waters. You are doing something that you have never done before, and there is no right or wrong way to do it, but still you are all a great teacher. So keep up the good work, and thank you for your time. Any questions or
Dr.
comments?
Shafia, we have a few questions in the Q&A.
Yes.
We have first question about Bono's thinking hats, if they're considered a good method for assessment.
Yeah. Yes, the thinking hat is a very good way of assessing your students, because it is similar to the pyramid, you know, on how to level your questions. So it is a good way of using the different questions within these 6 hats to get an overall understanding of what your students think about the concept. So similar to the Bloom's taxonomy, it is a good way of assessing students.
Right, we have another question about authentic assessments and whether we could link them to formative or summative assessment.
Okay. Authentic assessment, again, this can be used either way, depending on your objective. So especially for summative assessment, when you want to give them, because they are not with you in person, authentic assessment would be very much suitable for summative assessing. But also in class, if you want to use authentic assessment, can also be used in a formative way, especially when children would benefit from their friends on feedback. Would feedback quality be the same with young students? How could this be adapted? So especially for young, I think feedback from the teacher is very much important, regardless of the student's age. But for young children, because they are very dependent on the teachers, so they will see teachers as the information provider. Whereas for older children, feedback would take the form of very minimal feedback, because you want them to be to own their own self-learner. Assessment is the intent of knowledge. Evaluation is to measure the progress. With all this new grading system, the effect is not the desired one. So what is the next step in your opinion? So again, you know, Dina, I think I agree very much with you that, you know, like I said, the COVID situation has forced us to look at assessment in a totally different way. And I very much welcome this, because We don't want students who are able to exercise their memory. You memorize something and then you give it back in the exam. So this is not a test of memory. When they go out into the world, they have a multitude of resources available. What do they do with those resources? That is the most important thing, not to exercise their memory. So thank you for that question, Dina. What is the difference between assessment and testing? So again, it depends on what is the purpose of the exercise. So assessment is more like wanting, like we talked about, there are two different purposes of assessment, formative and summative. So testing would fall under the summative assessment because we are testing for grading. Dr. Khalid, I don't read Arabic, so anybody want to translate?
Just 1 second. The question is about evaluation of the role of teachers in the presence of artificial intelligence in education.
The presence of?
Artificial intelligence in education.
Okay, I think that one we can hear more from Dr. Ghazal when he talks about artificial intelligence in education. I wish this workshop was more practical and interactive to enhance our educational experience like the previous ones, but thanks for your efforts. Okay, because of the time given, you know, there's so much to talk about, and a hands-on experience would take a workshop, you know, because we need to show a lot of ways of using these. Can we have an example of distance assessment for a certain class level? We just talked about that. How can assessment enhance students' critical thinking skills? It seems a real challenge to them. Yes, so again, critical thinking. So it depends on the kind of task that you give them. So in order to encourage them to critically think about something, you know, giving them problem situations and asking them to engage in real world situations would actually encourage them to engage in critical thinking. How can we apply assessment strategies to kindergarten? Some parents don't bother logging on to the online lessons or give the worksheets to the students to complete. Not all students are comfortable speaking online, so there is no evidence of participation. So at the kindergarten level, again, we need to reconceptualize assessment. Why are we assessing? Why do we even want to assess kindergarten children? They are just starting their learning journey. Why do we want to assess? That is my opinion. You know, for what? Assess them and do what? So get them, you know, on board, encourage them to speak, and if they, you know, choose not to speak, maybe, you know, we can encourage them to write something. But with kindergarten, of course, they will not be able to write yet. So participation can be done in different ways. So the teacher will need to encourage them to participate, you know, in a different way. About the open book exams, if I choose this type of exam, not the question should be complicated, indirect, many step solution. If so, is that considered to be differentiated exam? I don't quite understand the question. If I choose this type of exam as not the questions should be complicated. Indirect, many step solution. Yes. Okay. Yes, I understand. So when you are giving open book exams, it depends what you are testing. So in an open book question, of course, you know, if you are a chemistry teacher, you give them some open book question. There are some right and wrong answers. Of course, they need to be producing, showing you some indication of understanding of concepts, you know. Unless, you know, in an open book, you are asking about their opinion based on a situation. So let's say you are talking about pollution or what to do with that. So they can then use all the concepts that they have learned to come up with a solution. How to assess kindergarten student based on, okay, how about data analysis that is more effective? You know, I would disagree with assessing kindergarten children. You know, so we can, if you want, the intention is formatively assessing them, yes, in order to help them. But if the intention is for summative assessment, that defeats the purpose of them attending or engaging in this journey. So if it is for formative assessment for kindergarten children, again, for very young learners, you have different learning outcomes. Students should be able to maybe work with others. So with that, even with young children, you should be able to, so teacher is the best person to do observation. So by observing, you can know a lot of things. My registration screen says resend the email, but resend for no clickable. Okay. Dr. Conte is not uploaded university website. Okay. What type of assessment is used to assess the curriculum and instructional method? So assessing curriculum and instructional method, I'm not quite sure about what this question is about. Assessing curriculum, this is what you're doing. Curriculum material, this is what you're doing. You can do different forms of different types of assessment. Instructional method, I don't think this is on the part of the teacher. Okay, where can I find registration link? How frequent shall we give feedback, both oral and written? So feedback, when it comes to feedback, both oral and written feedback is good, but you know, oral feedback, they may forget. They forget, they understand, they may understand, but they will quickly forget. So both oral and written, especially the written one, is very, very important. For any work that they submit, rather than giving them good work, how good it is, where can I improve, what am I lacking, you know, so just good is not enough. A detailed written feedback is important. I have an issue logging in. Where's the link to submit reflection? Reflection. Okay. Do you think the changing the perspective of grading as a goal of assessment needs to be changed? Have you changed the grading system at the university? Okay. What do you think about grading as a goal of assessment? So the question is, Amjad, thank you very much for your question. So again, if you ask me personally, I don't believe in putting a label on a student, because that is not an indication of their ability. So children, students should be lifelong learners. So any form of grading that you did should be something that motivates them to become a lifelong learner. But then again, I do share the concern that if a student wants to enter university, of course, they need to know where the student stands in comparison to other students who are applying the same. So nowadays, I think universities especially, they are doing away slowly with the grades that appear in the transcript, but focusing more on other forms of knowing whether getting the information from the applicant, whether or not they can engage in problem solving situations. So nowadays, even universities or workplace are focusing on giving students a situation and seeing if the way they would think about solving that issue, rather than focusing just on the transcripts. With assessment of KG age students, I found that parents sending videos worked well when they were too shy to be online. Yes, that's a good way of you know, with this teachers and other peers, they may be very shy. So we want to catch them in the moment. Some parents are yes, doing that. They will take the video of the child working off screen and send it to the teacher. How can I get presentation? Okay, this will be made available. What's your opinion on how to change assessment should be current students low? I don't understand the question.
Excuse me, Dr. Shafia.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah. It was just brought to our attention that we still have 2 minutes before the live streaming stops.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you. What is your opinion on how to change, how the change in assessment should be current in a current student low level consideration to the class they are in after they're coming back to, don't think I understand this question. I think it is asking about now that students have been online for almost 2 years, that they are coming in face to face, how should assessment be considered? So again, yes, thank you for that question. I think we need to go easy with them, because they are so used to being behind the screen. So everything is, they need to adjust to this normalcy. So give them some time when they are coming back to face-to-face class. Please suggest a good way to assess students in grade 2 who don't get any help from parents, so that they become confident and learn to. Yes, I think with the problem is that you know, now the online classes can be considered as quarantine classes, where there is these protruding eyes from the parents who want to help. The whole point is not to get the right answer. The whole point is to know the student. So parents helping the students get showing the right answer is not helping the student. Yes, the correct answer is given, but does it paint a good picture of the child? We are, as a teacher, we're trying to help the child, not to, the aim is not to get the correct answer. The aim is for the child to learn. Okay, in my experience, acknowledging Okay, should assessment itself be limited to assessment curriculum only? No, definitely no. We want to assess the child as a whole person, not only on their understanding of the curriculum. As if students care about written feedback, the majority only care about passing. Yes, that's very true. Praising a struggling student for making noticeable improvement should be part of every assessment strategy. Yes, very much so. Do you recommend varying assessment tools to match with the learner's level and learning styles? This is going to be quite hard because, you know, children have different learning styles. And if assessment can be matched with their learning styles and levels, that would be very good. And this is the whole point of Gardner's seven multiple intelligences. You know, children have different multiple intelligences, and assessment tools, when differentiated, if it matches, then I believe it will be very, very beneficial for the students and the teacher as well. Okay, assessment should focus more on students, what students can do, and less on what they can't do. Can you also little light on assessment as learning? So assessment as learning is the assessment itself is used as a learning tool. So the focus is quite different, where the assessment is placed at a point of learning where it forms part of the learning. So as opposed to assessment of learning and assessment for learning, assessment as learning is when assessment is placed as part of the learning process. So things like problem-based learning are examples of assessment as learning. Reflection. Okay, Layal, I think we can stop now.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Shafia, for the great and informative presentation. I think everyone can agree. I could read the comments in the chat. I just want to answer to the questions in the chat about accessing the recorded material and getting certificate of attendance or certificate of completion. You need to register in ADU community portal, the link to which has been provided by the IT department in the chat as well. Please note that the final reflection, which there has been a lot of questions about in the chat, will be uploaded tomorrow. And the deadline to submit it in order to get a certificate of completion will be on November 4 by 11:59 p.m. Abu Dhabi, UAE timing. Please also allow me to remind you that the last session of Module 5 has been postponed from October 21 to October 24 for the occasion of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, birthday, or Al-Mawlid al-Nabawi Sharif in Arabic. However, the fourth module, engaging students in distance learning, will still be tomorrow at 5 p.m. as scheduled. So see you all tomorrow at 5 p.m. for module 4. And thank you again. Have a lovely evening, everyone.